on the Hawkeye Sports Network from Learfield. This is the Fight for Iowa podcast, brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy, proud partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Big Ten Conference. Also by Iowa's Corn Farmers of the Iowa Corn Growers Association and Iowa Corn Promotion Board. You may think Iowa grows corn, but the truth is, corn grows Iowa. Also brought to you by Shields. We're right there with you in Des Moines, Sioux City, Iowa City, and Cedar Falls. This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
Iowa football looks for an offensive breakout this week, hosting Mountain West opponent Nevada Reno. The Hawks are 1-1 following their loss to Iowa State. The Wolfpack is 2-1 after suffering its first defeat to FCS foe Incarnate Word Saturday night. The Hawkeyes look to jumpstart that offense that has struggled the first couple weeks of the schedule. We'll break down Saturday night's matchup at Kinnick Stadium when we return with Nevada veteran play-by-play man John Ramey. The Fight for Iowa podcast is sponsored by Shields, Athletico, and Iowa Corn.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
Oh, you know that old injury of yours? The one in your knee or maybe back? Instead of going to the doctor and then doing physical therapy, why not start with therapy first? Athletico Physical Therapy is changing the whole healing process around. Their physical therapists will find the source of your pain and help fix it. Start with them and start living pain-free. Just like that.
It all starts with Athletico Physical Therapy. Schedule your free assessment at athletico.com. No prescription needed. Proud partner of the Iowa Hawkeyes.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
The Iowa-Nevada matchup showcases strong defenses and outstanding special teams. Iowa, with some injured receivers expected to return, along with number one tailback Gavin Williams, hopes for an offensive explosion. Nevada's offense had a culture change this year. Former Hawkeye star linebacker Jay Norvell left after 5 seasons as head coach of the Wolfpack, taking the air raid offense with him to Colorado State. Enter Ken Wilson, a longtime defensive coach at Oregon and Washington State, and a former assistant at Nevada. Nevada Radio Network play-by-play talent John Ramey joins us in describing Ken Wilson's approach as more conservative offensively.
Wilson, the Wilsonian era, is one where it's run to win, it's control the ball. Ken is a defensive coach by trade, and so there has been a greater emphasis as far as the defensive effort and the centrality of that defensive effort to the competitive culture of the team, I would say. This is Wilson's first head coaching job. He was a Nevada assistant for many years, then went to Washington State and at Oregon, where he was a co-coordinator with the Ducks, most recently on the defensive side. It's funny, he'll make a joke that if you look at Mike Leach's coaching tree, he was with Leach at Washington State. He's the only defensive guy under Leach who's gotten a head coaching job. And it's interesting because Jay Norvell, a proud Iowa alum, is also tied to Leach through Matt Mumme, his offensive coordinator at Nevada and at Colorado State, because of course Hal Mumme and Mike Leach were the godfathers of the air raid system. So, tangled webs we weave.
Indeed. And Hal Mumme started his career, or at least formed his personality, at Iowa Wesleyan College, which is 40 miles south of Iowa City in Mount Pleasant. So it all comes home to roost somewhat. The Hawks faced a 6'9" offensive tackle last week with the Cyclones. Now they face a 6'9" quarterback in Nate Cox, and I was looking at his numbers. He's off to a good start. I mean, he played in several games last year. Started the Quick Lane Bowl against Western Michigan, and he's coming into the position this year with a lot of experience. I know you have 2 quality quarterbacks, but they're off to a good start statistically.
Cox got his first start this season in the loss this most recent Saturday to Incarnate Word. He completed 22 of 43, threw for 302 yards. It was Nevada's best day offensively. They put 41 points on the board. Cox and Shane Illingworth, who had been the starter in the first 2 games, both have been imperfect but effective. Illingworth, perhaps the more polished passer. He's a transfer from Oklahoma State. Cox had been in the system with the previous coaching staff. He is a much more skilled runner. He's about 6'9", 215 soaking wet. So you don't necessarily think you're going to see somebody who's going to go mix it up between the tackles as a runner, but he's got these long strides and he falls forward. And there were several instances, I'm thinking at least 2 and maybe 3, this most recent Saturday, where like on a 3rd and long, they would run design quarterback draws. They were real effective. He's a tough runner. Both quarterbacks, Illingworth and Cox, have had some unforced errors in the passing game, especially the short passing game. Neither has really been a consistent downfield long passing threat to this point. So both guys have room for improvement, and I suspect you'll see both Illingworth and Cox in the game against Nevada this upcoming Saturday.
With any football west of Denver, the old adage is they throw it all over the ball yard. That's not totally accurate, but tell us about your receiving corps.
A lot of them transferred to Colorado State to follow Jay Norvell, who was by trade a receivers coach. Jay had done a tremendous job, had built up the best receiving corps in the conference. The best of those receivers is Romeo Dobbs, who just made his NFL debut with the Green Bay Packers this past Sunday. A very good receiver who has eligibility left named Torrey Horton led the charge to transfer to Colorado State. Another good receiver went to San Jose State. So Nevada's kind of starting from scratch. Their best returning receiver is a slot receiver and a kick returner named Jamal Bell. He wears number 3. He had been very effective this year, but he did have an unfortunate fumble on Saturday, but that's really been his only miscue. There's a transfer from Oregon, wears number 4, BJ Castile, who seems to be a pretty sure-handed downfield threat. And number 5, Dale Vaughn Campbell, who is another transfer, made a couple athletic plays, kind of going up and getting jump balls down the sideline against Incarnate Word this past Saturday. And those were the first plays that we've seen from him or any of the receiving corps, to my eyes, that looked like legitimate, consistent downfield kind of athleticism. The receiving corps this year is undersized. We don't have a lot of tall guys on the edge. It kind of looks like a bunch of slot or inside receivers to a man. I think Campbell's over 6 feet, but generally it's a bit undersized.
Talking with John Ramey, Nevada Reno play-by-play man, a veteran. You're 2-1 out of the gate. What have been the highlights, and where are the issues after 3 games, in your opinion?
Well, after the first 2 games, which were a workmanlike victory at New Mexico State in week 0, 23-12, and then a blowout against Texas State at home, 38-14. But there had been a defensive score in the 38 points. The first 2 games, it was pretty much Nevada's offense has to play par golf, and Nevada's defense and special teams are going to be very, very good. And that's kind of the path to victory. And that's probably the only path to victory. So when Incarnate Word, an FCS team, a good FCS team, came to town last week, having hung 64 on the board in their opener, we were all concerned that this turns into a shootout. Nevada's offense may not have enough to hang in there. But the hope was the defense would continue its stout play. Now, the defense had a bad day, and it was a bad day to have a bad day. And Incarnate Word got 55 on the board, and Nevada, even with 41, by far their best offensive day, just couldn't keep up. So I would say it is a Nevada team that doesn't explode kind of off the roster with incredible talent individually, but especially on the defensive side, there is a physicality. And there is they're veterans. They have a really veteran secondary that now has 7 interceptions in 3 games, and 11 total takeaways in 3 games. Dom Peterson on the defensive line is great. Ken Wilson, who has coached at in the Power 5 as well as with Nevada, says he's the most disruptive defensive lineman he's ever coached. So he wears 0, and Dom will line up anywhere on the defensive. Outside, inside, he moves around. He's a problem. I would say the defensive culture and playmaking ability is better than I had hoped for. But it is the strength of the team. I mean, Nevada's got a functional new punter and a guy named Matt Freem, who's got about 3 punts that he's pinned the team inside the opposing team inside the 20, and he's been over 50 yards about 3 or 4 times. Really good place kicker, Brandon Talton, who could end up the all-time kicker by the end of the year at Nevada.
University of Nevada, Reno play-by-play voice John Ramey will have more breakdown of the Hawkeyes' opponent this week, right after an important word from our sponsors on Fight for Iowa.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
There's a sense of pride that comes from the life of a farmer. How many people can say they have a famous tan named after them, or be known for their wave when they drive past neighbors and strangers alike on a 2-lane road? Whether it's a farmer's tan or the farmer's wave, we are proud to be known for a lot of things. We feel that pride every night at the dinner table, knowing we feed our family and yours. Iowa Corn is proud to be on the sidelines cheering on the Iowa Hawkeyes. In Iowa, we grow corn, but the truth is, corn grows Iowa.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
Iowa and Nevada play under the lights Saturday at Kinnick Stadium. The Wolfpack secondary is filled with 4th and 5th-year players, a major reason why this defense has 11 takeaways through 3 games, including 7 interceptions, 4 of those by Bentley Sanders, a senior transfer from South Florida. Here's Nevada play-by-play man John Ramey.
He transferred in before the 2021 season. He has the most interceptions. He's got 4 on the year, including 1 return for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. So he's the interceptingest of the defensive backfield. But I like a guy named Tyson Williams. He wears number 6. He's from Dothan, Alabama. He was thrust into a starting role due to an injury very early in his freshman campaign in a game at Air Force. And if you're not familiar with football in the West, playing against Air Force anywhere is tough because they run the triple option, but especially at the academy, it's even higher up in elevation than Reno. And Williams, from that moment, has just been a tremendously sound safety. And now in his final season of eligibility, he's more mature physically. He's like having a coach on the field. So he's kind of one of my favorite Pack players of all time. The safety who wears number 6, Tyson Williams, and he hits. It's like I grew up watching Ronnie Lott, so I enjoy watching a safety who can really impose their physicality on the game.
Now, we had Bob Sanders here, so we have an idea what contact is. And so how do you see this game after 3 played with the Wolfpack? How do you see this game playing out? What insight can you give us from the other side right now?
I would have to say that I think Nevada will be very conservative with regard to taking chances downfield. There has not yet been any kind of consistency. I think Nevada will take a shot, or perhaps several downfield, but it will come at very kind of prescribed moments. Mm-hmm. I think by and large, you're going to see the Nevada offense could try to control the ball as much as possible, play a field position game. A lot of it will be determined how effectively they can run the football. And obviously when you're running against, Iowa, it's different than running against Texas State. So that will kind of that'll be the hinge point on offense. The quarterbacks to this point, Illingworth or Cox, you're going to get above 50% completion, and there have been a couple misfires on the short passes, but you'll see your wide receiver screens, your swing plays, try to get the ball out kind of laterally and spread things out. But yeah, I think if Nevada can run the ball at all, then I think you'll see a more competitive game. And obviously, Nevada's defense hasn't faced anybody in the Big Ten yet. So if we see something like what we saw in the first 2 games and not against Incarnate Word, then I think, those are ingredients for a competitive matchup. But as as much as I love Group of 5 and I love parity throughout all of FBS, when it's a Mountain West team against a Pac-12 team or a Big Ten team, it can be challenging. But, Nevada beat Purdue at our place, 3 years ago. So it happens.
The Hawkeyes are hoping the opposite happens. Defensive lineman Lucas Van Ness is the Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week. Van Ness blocked 2 punts against Iowa State last week. The first time a Hawkeye has swatted away two since Sean Considine worked the feat at Iowa State in 2003. I'll wrap up this week's Fight for Iowa in just a minute.
More of the Fight for Iowa podcast after this.
Here we go. Exciting adventures await. Grab your bucket list and keep the fun going all summer long. Pitch a tent, grab a sleeping bag, and sleep as a family under the stars. Fire up the grill and host a backyard barbecue. Visit a local trail for a hike or a drive to a state park for an all-day family adventure. With all there is to do this summer, we encourage you to get outside and make new memories. Whatever you do this summer, Shields is right there with you.
This is the Fight for Iowa podcast. Here's the voice of the Hawkeyes, Gary Dolphin.
Iowa's star fifth-year senior defender in field hockey, Anthe Nizel, is the Big Ten's Defensive Player of the Week, her sixth Big Ten weekly honor. The native of the Netherlands led the Hawks to a 2-0 week with wins over Providence and Massachusetts. Nizel registered 3 points with a goal and assist and anchored a defense that surrendered just 5 shots. I'm Gary Dolphin. Thanks very much for attending this week's Fight for Iowa, courtesy of Athletico, Shields, and Iowa Corn. Go Hawks!
Hawkeye fans, remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. Once you become a Fight for Iowa podcast subscriber, you'll automatically receive the latest episodes of the Fight for Iowa podcast, the Hawkeyes Voice podcast, Hawk Talk replays, exclusive game day content, and more. The preceding has been a Learfield presentation on the Hawkeye Sports Network.